Well, hello again. This is Kevin Almanac, and this is my show, Listening with Kevin, where I invite a friend over to my living room to pick out a selection through my vinyls and sit down and talk about music and have a beverage or two. So I'm so happy today to be fortunate enough to have an old friend of mine, and I say old because we're old men now, but old in the sense that we grew up together, went to grammar school together, 8 years at Mary Seat of Wisdom, and then we kind of went our separate ways, but we really got a chance to get back together through Facebook and social media, as most people do these days. So I'd like to welcome Mr. Chris McGuire. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks for having me, Kevin.
Yeah. It is fantastic to be able to see you, and it's probably been 35 years.
It has. I was thinking in 1983 we graduated, so
Yeah.
it was around that amount of time.
And maybe we bumped into each other here and there, but yeah, it's incredible. And I'm so happy that you kind of volunteered for this brutal interview.
Love it. Looking forward to it.
So, since it's about music, we're going to go over a few selections. I know you previously picked out a handful of things. So let's just get started. What are we going to hear first?
So first, I picked out Jethro Tull, "Songs from the Wood," which is an album I bought at the Rolling Stone, probably when we were about 13 or 14 years old.
Yeah,
And
Rolling Stone, great record store in Norwich, which is still there.
I think probably the greatest record store ever.
Now, Park Ridge, when we were growing up, had Rainbow Records. Do you remember that?
Records, yeah, right up in downtown.
Yeah,
not
yeah.
far from here.
Right behind Pines or wherever
right.
we bought our school shirts.
All the school uniforms.
Oh, Jesus. I can't even wear that color blue. They call it North Carolina blue. I call it Mary Seat of Wisdom blue. It doesn't work for me.
But this is good. Ian Anderson, I saw them a few years ago at the Chicago Theater.
They still a few years ago, they're still
yeah,
playing.
they're still traveling. It was
He's still playing the flute?
He's playing, not as much as he's still very, very good. Sounded good.
All right. He's not wearing tights, is he? He's not
no tights.
All right. Well, let's put it on just to give it some background music. All right.
Good.
Songs from the Wood, this is called.
Yes.
All right. Oh, yeah.
These guys, we heard Jethro Tull a lot growing up, but they're like one of those bands I think that's been kind of forgotten by the radio, other than maybe Aqualung occasionally.
And I don't know if you listen to radio at all, but it's so programmed now. It's just a loop of the same random whatever songs that they want to make money off of. It seems like. I don't know if there's a record station. Unfortunately, I don't listen to radio as much anymore, just for that reason. But I'd love to hear a station, much like this show, where you just come in and pick out different things for what someone feels like that moment, and then play it.
There's a couple. I listened to The Drive a lot, 97.1, and on my car they have an ID or an HD, like the Drive 2 or HD 2, where somehow instead of listening to the regular station with all the commercials, several stations, WLS, WXRT, The Drive has a second version that used to be online as well, where you hear a lot of deep tracks, no commercials, and
that's nice.
Trying.
And I know I'm not as versed in kind of looking into music, and I'm sure you can find online a lot of those unique kind of stations, and I'm still just FM, AM,
I know.
regular TV kind of guy.
The old school.
Everyone's streaming everything. I'm like,
how about Sirius? Do you ever listen to Sirius radio?
I had it in my car when I bought it for the first year, and then after that, I'm like, I don't know. I still play CDs in my car.
Mm-hmm.
I have, I don't know, hundreds of CDs.
Mm-hmm.
So, I might as well get the mileage out of them. Since no one, I still have tapes from growing up. So that's amazing.
You have a tape player?
I do not have a tape player. I have VHS tapes.
But you can't get rid of them.
Yeah. Well, I'd rather do that because when I'm also, I'm either in the car to get somewhere, back and forth, and not for a long time, or on a long car ride. So if I'm on a long car ride, I'd like to have CDs kind of putting in whatever my mood might be at that moment. But I know everyone likes to stream, and you do it on your phone, and you know,
Yes.
make your playlist. But you know, when you're driving, sometimes you don't know. You don't know how you're gonna feel.
I had 3 long trips during COVID, during the pandemic. In June, my son and I drove to Naples, Florida.
Oh yeah.
So we drove 20 hours.
Oh, my brother lives down there.
It's beautiful,
Yeah.
really nice. My folks had a place and they were still hanging out there into June. And then I took 2 trips to Raleigh-Durham, North Carolina in August and recently. And it made it so much easier having Sirius. I mean, growing up, whenever we did a long distance ride, you'd get into some rural part of Pennsylvania,
Oh
Ohio.
yeah. You couldn't get a radio station.
There was some
Farm
talk show,
report.
farm report, religious station,
Oh,
something
yeah.
like that.
Yeah,
Couldn't
yeah.
get any music, but I have Sirius, and it really made it far more flexible.
Yeah, if you're not religious, all you gotta do is take a long trip through the middle of this country, and you'll find it on the
You'll hear
radio.
it all.
Did you? How your parents had a place a long time down in Naples?
They bought it in probably the worst time you could, 2006.
Oh,
so
okay.
right at the
So,
top of the market.
Sure.
And watched it go down, and now it's kind of climbed its way back up. But they had been renting places down there for years, and we'd go down usually for a week or 2 in the spring,
That's nice.
and longer. And then they bought it, so it's nice. It's been nice for my sisters and I and the kids.
Yeah, with especially with kids, when you're by the water, it's just convenient to have a place like that. We had a place growing up. My family had a place in Longboat Key for about 20
nice.
years.
Beautiful.
So that was
Mm-hmm.
kind of like a second home for us. But it's fun just to be able to get on an airplane and know you don't have to make reservations. You just
Is that up near Tampa?
It's about 45 minutes south, maybe, of
Okay.
Tampa.
Mm-hmm.
Tampa City, but real, it's close to the highway. So I think it's in between maybe Naples and Tampa.
Okay, makes sense.
Maybe it's a little longer from Tampa, but yeah, it's almost halfway, I think.
We fly into Fort Myers, and then
Yeah.
where my folks are in North Naples, so it's 25 minutes or so to get there.
Now, you said you saw Jeff Paul just a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I think it was, God, within, you know what, maybe it's more than a couple. Maybe
Well,
it's
that's
more
all
like 5 or 6,
Yeah.
but certainly within the last 6
Well, this
or 8.
past year feels like it didn't even happen, so.
Yeah, we haven't.
1 year just went by and it was all
I know it was
set.
the 40th anniversary of Aqualung, so we were amongst the younger people there at age 45 at the time. But it was good. It was really good. Very good.
So my brother's youngest daughter, you know, when she was in grammar school or something in the band, she played the flute, or so my brother thought, and they had a concert. So my brother was gonna, it was a big performance, or the whole class is playing. So my brother's like, I want to show you some video of a flutist. So he shows her Ian Anderson jumping around, you know, playing everything. And she's like, wow, that's amazing. So he goes to the show. All sounded great. After the show, you know, they get back in the car to head home, and my brother's like, you know, you played very well tonight. When we get home, can you play, you know, that one part? I really enjoyed it. And she goes, oh, no. I don't play. I just put it up to my lips and go like
Satisfy mom and dad.
Yeah, so my brother thought she was like the next Ian Anderson, but she's like, yeah. I just go up
Did you
to
play
her.
instruments growing up?
I did not. I could barely play the stereo growing up, but, you know, growing up with Gino, who,
Yes.
you know, unbelievable musician. And I had a piano in my house at one point in my life growing up, and I could not play anything. Chopsticks, I couldn't play that. Yeah, for some reason, I have no musical talent whatsoever.
But did Gino play guitar growing up as well?
No, you know, Gino learned. Great story about Gino, who's for those of you probably seen him if you've seen the show before. Gino was the lead guitarist and co-songwriter for a band called Filter, alternative rock. Went to Berklee College of Music, but really his first year of high school he went to La Lumiere in Indiana. Well, not a military school. Is it a military
No,
school?
I think it's a Catholic boarding school.
Yeah, boarding school. So he broke his roommate's guitar or bass guitar. So his roommate made him buy it. So since he bought it, he figured he
Let's
should
get some use out of it.
he figured out how to fix it, and he started playing, and he adapted to it, and really fell in love with music at that point. And he really, that was around, let's see, that's 84, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the Police and Sting were very big back then, so that was his idol. So he wanted to play guitar. He wanted to play all the Police songs, so he really kind of self-taught, really. At one point, he wanted Charlie and I to be part of the band.
Put a band together?
We had no talent, so that was quickly learned. And then he, literally a year later, tried out and was accepted to the Academy of the Arts in Chicago, and then 2 years there, and then on to Berkeley. So
I saw him once in high school randomly because I went to St. Ignatius.
Oh,
I was
yeah.
taking the L back to Park Ridge, and it probably was on the L. Just randomly, he got on with the guitar. We were probably 16 and talked for a little while, and that was the last I saw him.
a lot of times it was a case of beer because he'd buy down there and bring it back. That's a story for another day, but
It's good. It's great to have that talent.
Yeah.
I mean, I have 3 kids, and I tried to give them that. We got a piano when I was about 11, so we took piano lessons. My mom made us take piano lessons. So that was 7th and 8th grade, and it was, the novelty was good at the beginning, but I think by age 12, as a 12-year-old boy, no interest,
No.
to be outside,
Playing
running around,
ball or
playing
something,
baseball,
yeah.
and now I look back and think, God, why didn't I stay with it?
although if you could have became a Major League Baseball player, that would
would've
have that would be great too. So
Didn't have that talent either.
no.
I
No.
tried.
Yeah, me too. You go through that. It's it just shows you the extent of how good, when people do succeed at something, how good they actually
It
are.
really is.
It's really impressive. And for these guys to still be playing even a handful of years ago, after 40 years, I mean, that's just amazing.
And you learn to respect how good these guys are. I started taking guitar 12 years ago, and I studied for 6 years at the Old Town School of Folk
Yeah,
Music.
yeah.
I'm very much a novel guitarist, but you learn enough where you can at least understand the chords and you can play some music.
Yeah.
And it's phenomenal. And I was like, God, why wasn't I doing this 30 years ago?
Do you listen to things differently now that you have an appreciation for them?
Yes, I do. I think it's really like what's insightful is, I mean, again, with my very basic levels of, I'm better than a guy who's played for 6 months, but still not a great guitarist, but seeing how the music is composed, and I think when I try to play songs, like I'll play something with Neil Young. Neil Young has fairly simple chords. You can play a lot of Neil Young songs with a basic understanding. He's still brilliant for what he's put together. I'm not diminishing what he's done, but when I try to play Jimmy Page or play even some of the complicated Beatles songs, it blows me away. It's like well beyond my capability.
It is amazing how complicated it is, right?
It's incredible. It's given me a far greater admiration for these amazing musicians and what they've done.
I have trouble remembering questions to ask in this show, let alone this whole song. So yeah, it is something else, the music business. And and we did our first show last week, but I'll kind of say it again. Music is a big part of people's lives. Even unconsciously, it's in everything we do. Whether you realize it or not, sometimes you have a song playing in your head for no
It
reason.
is. And how long does it stay in your head?
Yeah.
It sticks with you, and you're humming it all day, whether you want to or not. I was with some friends, an old college friend, and we were at their summer home in Michigan back in August or September. And his mother, poor gal, is like 81 years old, but she's been fighting Alzheimer's for a long time. And we're sitting with my friend's mom, and we're out at a campfire and just listening to music. And she wouldn't remember my name, didn't remember my name, even though I've known her for 30 years. She'll say hello. Even she couldn't even remember if she liked the food she was eating or not. And it's really hard when you see that.
That's rough.
But every single song, we're playing songs from the 40s and 50s and 60s, the Kingston Trio and old Frank Sinatra songs, and she knew every single word. So it's very much within.
Yeah, it shows how your brain kind of recalls what it wants to at that point, right?
It really does.
Even though it's fighting off a horrible disease, it's so ingrained in there.
Yes, it is. It's kind of amazing.
Yeah.
Really amazing.
And that's, and I think that's one of the harder parts that people don't realize about, listen, the whole COVID thing is difficult all the way around. But one of the hard parts is that there's people who I know who are live music junkies. They have to see live music all the time. And I'm sure this past year has just been torture for them.
Have you been seeing any shows on? I know there are concerts online. You can buy tickets to.
You know what? I don't dedicate myself time in front of the TV or the computer or even the record player necessarily. I'll be doing 5 things at one time if I'm home, so I won't concentrate and sit down and focus, other than work, which I have to. But it's enjoyable. But yeah, but for leisure time, I don't focus like that.
So what do you do in your leisure time?
I'll
either COVID or pre-COVID.
I'll be in my kitchen making maybe 1 or 2 items while doing dishes, while having a movie or music playing, and while maybe answering emails. So that's kind of how my life goes. And then I'll take it. When I take a break and have to eat something, I'll sit in front of the TV and maybe pop the channels here and there, but I'm not dedicated to a TV show. I've probably seen every movie, maybe not focused on it the full 2 hours, but, music-wise, I'll let the computer just play music usually, but even that gets a little bit old for me.
Pandora or Spotify, things like
No,
that.
I haven't even gotten into that. I probably should. I'll just put YouTube on and put it like a channel, or I'll play like whatever mix of songs I have been listening to.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I'm just not that savvy, or maybe I just haven't had the time to focus on leisure.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, I'm during the day I'm out running errands. You got to get out of the house.
Absolutely.
I know I'm going to be in here, for long periods of time. So anytime I have a chance to run to Walgreens or run to the store, or
Kind of shopping at the grocery store is a little more of an event right now.
I love it.
No one can get out and do it.
And I've always loved that. Like for me, that's my kind of release, is looking. I can do it at record shops. I can do it at Jewel. Looking at different ingredients, looking at things, getting ideas. What about you? Are you kind of the?
We've done, with the music-wise, what we did over the summer during COVID, one of my friends, George Vasnos, would come up, and George would come up from Indianapolis and just hang out for the night and reminisce about growing up.
Now he's a record enthusiast.
He's a big record enthusiast, so he has 13,000 records and buys and sells a lot.
And does he have every genre of music? Or?
Yes, almost. He just has a lot of everything.
Yeah.
I mean, generally, he's kind of buying and selling as a hobby, because younger people and records are hot now. So like the vinyl has really become an industry, and people, even young kids, teenage kids, want to have the record. Although when we were teenagers, we were gravitating towards CDs and kind of going away from the vinyl and thinking, wow, the CD's pretty cool, which it was in the mid 80s. But there's this new like that it's a hip thing to have. So he loves records, loves music. He buys a lot of blues, so he's got a lot of old blues music, and that's where he spends a lot of his real time, is trying to buy good blues records. But with that many records, he'll just buy a collection and kind of sell a few, and then keep what he likes, and just swap for interest. But he would come up, and at my house, he said, okay, I have speakers on my back porch, so we would just barbecue some food, start having some drinks, and he's like, okay, everybody gets 3 songs. So it was almost like a game, trying to find out, okay, what 3 songs from New Order or Ministry or
that's great.
Something from Kenny Loggins and Messina are you going to try to shock the other guy? So we're always looking for deep tracks. And it kind of brings you back to like looking at your records.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I haven't thought about that for a long time.
This obviously is all kind of inherited for the most part, but if I had to go out and start buying albums again, it would probably cost me 10 times the amount of whatever this is valued at. And my last guest, who was on my buddy Josh, is a huge blues guy. So that was kind of our last show was the blues. So it's nice to have a little change of music. Why don't we move to the next album?
Okay. Should we
It's
go?
always tricky pulling off the needle.
Why don't we go? Do you have these in order?
No,
Okay.
I don't. No order.
All right. Well, should we go to Beatles?
Yeah. Is there?
How about
The two old guys are trying to read the albums. It's
I know.
like
I need the glasses. Can't get through it anymore.
good thing you're not a watchmaker. Be in trouble.
All right. How about side 2?
All right. I think we'll just start from the beginning, right? I'm sure we're all going
that's
to know
perfect.
these.
Beatles were always my favorite.
What's the first song you remember listening to that affected you, that you remember, I guess?
Probably Beatles Revolution.
Yeah.
I think.
Who was playing it?
We had these 6 cassette tapes that my mom and dad had that were,
Not 8 tracks.
no, not 8 tracks. These were after the 8 tracks, but they were the life of the Beatles, say, early days, and then even until their post.
Kind of their anthology.
Really, it was a mini anthology
Yeah.
back in the 70s. So it was something like that, or, and I listened to Revolution over and over and over. So
Yeah.
I just was always passionate about the Beatles.
It's funny how music hits you, or when it does finally hit you. You know, it took me. I wasn't necessarily into music right away. I mean, I can remember songs hearing from my brothers and sister, but it did take me a while to mature into it. To start having an appreciation where I wanted to search it out.
I didn't have any older siblings, but I had an older cousin and some
Yeah.
older friends, and so many of us, you learn from like that guy that's 3 or 5 years older,
Exactly.
or your brothers,
Yeah.
what's he listening to, and that kind of defines our musical taste.
And then also, you know, we grew up in a interesting decade at the end of the 60s, basically we were born, but the 80s are probably where we were cultivating our musical knowledge. MTV. Yeah, we were the MTV.
We were the MTV.
It's, you know, I'll tell you, I would get cable. I don't have cable now because I just don't, again, I don't watch TV, but I would get cable if they actually had videos on MTV again.
You know how many times when you were growing up in grammar school or high school and you'd watch those videos at like 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock, those video
Awesome.
shows, and it
Yeah.
defined so many bands.
Well, and you know what else I have from growing up in that era? We had a VHS player, obviously, but I would record Friday night videos, which would play for an hour or two every Friday night. That was my
That's right.
my day. So I still have that on VHS somewhere.
When they'd advertise which video was going to debut on Friday
Yeah,
night,
yeah.
and you'd be excited to see it at nighttime.
And it was usually Michael Jackson.
Michael Jackson.
Jackson.
It always was.
Yeah.
Springsteen had one, I think, but
Yeah,
Michael
well,
Jackson was it.
Yeah, it's incredible.
And you think of how they were. Van Halen. I mean, Eddie Van Halen passing away. You know,
Yeah.
everyone's kind of reminiscing on Van Halen for good
And
reasons.
Springsteen's album just came out.
That's right.
Yes, I mean, those guys are all still around.
Yes.
Well, not still around, but I mean, their music's still.
I saw Van Halen a couple times in the last 10 years. I saw them when they came back in 07, so late November of 07, and we got tickets at the United Center at the side of the stage, and it just blew us away.
Now, were you a Van Hagar fan at all?
Not as much. A
No,
little bit.
I like the
Sam.
music, but I didn't feel like it was Van Halen.
Right.
You know, it was definitely felt like
Right.
a different band.
I had tickets to see the 5150 show back in high school, and I missed it for some reason. But seeing David
Was
Lee
that
up
back
here,
in high school?
high school, I think it was 85, 86. Yeah, it was probably might have been 86. Probably we were juniors in high school. And they played at the Horizon, Allstate.
What was the first concert you ever saw?
Chuck Berry.
That's awesome.
Chuck Berry, Chicago Fest in '79, I think.
At Navy Pier.
At Navy Pier.
Yeah, I was at. I might have. I don't know if that was the first one. I was at the very first one. In fact, my buddy Josh and I were just talking about it because he became good friends with a guy named Magic Slim, another blues player from Chicago. who played down there, and that's where he met him. But yeah, I was down at Case Chicago at Navy Pier.
So is that where your first concert was as well?
No. Well, I probably saw a show, but my first official concert would have been high school.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I take that back, but I'll tell you a quick story. I told it last week as well. My first show was the Cars at Poplar Creek.
What year was that? High school thing?
Yeah, in between maybe sophomore and maybe freshman and sophomore year. Wayne Chung opened up for him.
Oh,
So whatever year that was.
Great show.
Yeah, Wayne Chung and Cars at Poplar Creek, which is an amazing place.
Fantastic.
Now, probably 10 years? No, not even 10 years. Probably 7 years before that, my father took me with my grandmother to go see the Mandrell Sisters at Mill Run Theater.
Mm-hmm.
So that would have been my first show.
Wasn't that the one at Golf Mill?
Yeah. Remember that round building?
I do.
Yeah, Mill Run.
I remember Charlie Kennedy had a birthday party there.
Yeah, he did.
And they had a magic show, weird little kids.
That was weird.
That was the one time I was there.
You were were you at the ground round party that he did?
Maybe.
We had a lot of weird little. No, we had a great birthday for you. I remember we went to the Cubs game.
That was the Cubs game. That was,
Yeah, I remember
right.
going to that.
That was our 10th birthday.
Thanks for inviting me.
You're very welcome. My parents
40
did
years
something
ago.
that's very illegal right now, so they went. I remember tickets for the bleachers were $1.50. You could only buy them.
Were
day
they
of.
$1.50?
They were $1.50, and you could bring food in. So my parents went out. We didn't have a lot of money,
Yeah.
but they were just like, I had 10 friends coming along with my sisters, my mom and dad. We took our 2 family cars, packed everybody in the cars.
No
So-
seatbelt.
No seatbelts.
No.
We probably had 6 little
Bunch of
boys in the
monkeys.
back seat. We didn't have a station wagon either. They were
Oh
just
yeah. No,
just
I
regular
remember.
four-wheel
Yeah, it was.
cars. My mom and dad made peanut butter and jelly and put them in a bag. So
It's amazing
everyone
we
got-
survived.
Somehow we lived.
Unbelievable.
No accidents. So
Jesus. See, kids, it just goes to show you.
you can make it. Be responsible.
Well, be responsible. Don't be like us.
That
You'll be
was-
bald. Yeah, it's amazing what we did back then.
Mhm.
But those memories stick with you too, which are just incredible.
What's funny, it's like you remembering my 10th birthday,
Yeah.
one of the Cubs games.
Yeah.
And those are the things. I remember when we had our 8th grade reunion, I was talking to Neil McAleer, and I hadn't seen Neil since we were kids.
Yeah.
And we were talking about baseball. He said he had some White Sox tickets with his brother. I said, oh, that's cool. And I said, I always go for Yankees games. Oh, because you were always a
Oh,
Yankee
yeah.
fan.
I'm a Yankee fan
So
too.
those are the things that you know about the kids you grow up with.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny how it's again, like music, it just, you get ingrained with those
Mm-hmm.
those events or those ideas at an early age, and it just sticks with you.
Yes.
You never forget it, and that's special. You know, I don't know, when you get older, maybe you have more things to worry about, and you don't focus on the actual moment. Because when you're a little kid, the moment is the event, is the real thing, and that's why you remember it. Now we go through life and have moments, but it doesn't stick with us as much.
And your life's pretty simple, so there's not as much going on. Well, it was, at least.
Yeah.
I
Well,
can't
yeah.
say the same for kids today.
Yeah, who
The
knows?
power of an internet and the phone, but
Yeah.
our life was pretty
Yeah, we
simple.
didn't have all the outside noise.
Mhm. Yeah,
You know,
you're right.
it was really you woke up, you hope you saw someone that day.
If you went to someone's house, you could listen to you buy one record and you'd listen to the same record 3
Yeah.
times, not say, let's go on Pandora or let's go on the internet and hear
No.
thousands of different choices.
I mean, yeah, you had what you had. That was it. You didn't have choices. You had, a limited selection.
Every generation says it, our parents were probably looking at us thinking, oh my God, they have way too much, but it almost feels like now, having 3 kids, teenage and younger, knowing that what they're exposed to and what they deal with all the time, it's sensory overload.
Yeah.
I'm not a curmudgeon, but I just know it is. It's hard for these kids to navigate all of that.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's definitely hard for me.
It's hard for
I don't-
us.
Yeah, I don't even attempt it. I mean, people change the TV with their telephones, right? When I was growing up, I was the youngest in the family. I was the remote control. They would throw a shoe at me to change the channel, the knob on the TV. So that's all I knew. Time to change the channel. Wake up.
I remember we got our first remote control, I mean, this ages us, of course, but
Yeah.
like, oh, I don't have to get off the couch to do that.
Unbelievable.
It was pretty revolutionary.
Or recording TV shows
Mhm.
was amazing, and we had like a wire connected to the VHS machine that stretched to the couch, so you didn't have to get up, and you could pause it. But that was life.
That was pretty hip stuff.
Yeah. But and we've all kept up with technology. Obviously, we're filming this show just off of a little
On a telephone.
but still listening to, an invention from Thomas Edison.
It's true.
You know,
right.
How old is this? Maybe 100 years?
Yeah, probably
That's incredible.
for sure.
So there's that crossover, which is special.
True. And we go back to the basics.
That's about all I can go back to. What now with the Beatles? Do you have a favorite song? I know this is the only album I think I had from them. But
I really, the Beatles to me they define everything. So I always have loved listening to the Beatles, and I don't know if I have a favorite. If I had to pick a favorite, it would probably be Abbey Road when they have the medley of Polythene Pam and Me, Mr. Mustard, and She Came In Through the Bathroom Window, and I could listen to that album over and over and over.
It's now, are you a Paul McCartney fan or John Legend? Or John, not John Legend. I was just watching
I'd
his
probably
show.
say
the other day.
McCartney, but that's a tough choice. To
Yeah.
tell you the truth, I don't necessarily pick. I'm just pretty
Yeah.
even keeled with all of them.
I think because they're too well. We never saw the rest of John Lennon, but I think they're two very strong personalities, talent-wise. I think I lean towards John Lennon, but Paul McCartney has done so much after his death,
True.
so it's hard to kind of.
And what they've done, just the songwriting of those
Together.
two guys together,
Oh.
it's 1 + 1 =
Well,
5.
and also I think they're very different separately.
They
Like
are.
together,
Very much.
fantastic.
Very much. What they were able to contribute and do together
Yeah.
is it's just astounding. And what people don't realize, and even like when I've taught my kids about, I've kind of drilled into them how much the Beatles, how important they are, and I think as much as they try not to listen to their dad, I think they've listened a little bit. They don't admit it, but they eventually do. And the Beatles were only together 6 or 7 years. I mean, I shouldn't say that. They only produced albums for 6 or 7 years, from like I think 64 to 1970. So
Was that it?
it's that limited. You'd think the Beatles were around 15 years, but it was a very, very limited amount.
Well,
of
because you
time.
look at bands now. I mean, U2 or
Mhm.
U2 they've been together this whole time.
That's right, decades.
Rolling Stones.
But these were the days where
Rolling Stones was 40 years.
That's right. Back in those days, they were putting out 2 albums a year sometimes, so it wasn't like put an album out now, wait for 2 years or 3 years, like Taylor Swift can maybe sell out the world in terms of her concerts, but you may have an album now and maybe not.
I gotta say, I couldn't name one Taylor Swift song.
Neither could I.
Nor I might be able to recognize it, maybe, and I guess it's just because I don't listen to the radio, but I don't I don't search her out either. I know.
For younger people, she's certainly for teenagers.
Everything, right?
She's superstar.
That's incredible.
Unbelievable.
Yeah,
Sell out Soldier Field, stadium concerts.
it's unbelievable.
Everything.
And not to diminish her talent at all.
Mhm.
I just don't understand it. I guess.
Mm-hmm. I don't know her music at all. I know my kids have gone. They've seen her and they talk about it, but that's kind of my limit.
So in the winter of 1985, probably, I don't know, there was snow on the ground, so November, December, I was going to Loyola Academy my sophomore year. Charlie was going to Maine South, Charlie Kennedy. Charlie goes, listen, a bunch of us are going to see this show at the Horizon. You want to, or no, at UIC Pavilion, so downtown. You want to go? I said, who's playing? No, it's this new female artist. I said, no. I'm not really that into it.
Was it Beastie Boys opening for Madonna?
That was it.
I was there. That was kind of my first.
Now listen, the Beastie Boys were the best opening act I've ever seen. They got
Right.
booed off the stage. Dr. Kennedy was down there with Megan and all her friends, and then Charlie and our group were there as well. But what a great show!
Yeah, great show.
The first and last time I ever saw the Beastie Boys, unfortunately, I would have loved to see them again. I was a big fan of the Beastie Boys, but yeah, the Lucky Star tour or whatever.
She was, I was at that show. That was kind of after Chuck Berry, that was my first in-arena show. Because I had a friend in high school, a guy named Tom Custer, and Tom's mom worked for ABC News, and she'd get these free tickets sometimes. So she ended up getting these. He said, "Hey, do you want to go to this concert?" I'm like, I was like, I don't know about Madonna. It wasn't really a manly thing to do. So I didn't tell anyone I was going, but I'm like, I'd like to go to a concert. It sounds cool. So I went, and the show was a great show.
Unbelievable.
You saw Madonna back then.
Yeah.
And what she is, what she's done. I mean, one of the greatest artists of our life.
Yeah.
Really.
And I'm sure they'll say the same about Taylor Swift. So I'm just making that correlation. But and to see the Beastie Boys when they really didn't know what they were doing up there, or who they were opening up for.
Funny.
That was incredible.
That was good.
To see that mix, that contrast of music too, which is really bizarre.
I saw back about 13 years ago. I was moving from Connecticut to Chicago, and a friend of mine helped me move. We packed up the truck and we brought all this stuff for my business, and we drove from Connecticut to Cleveland. Stopped in Cleveland, and we said we're going to try to see an Indians game, but we got there late. So the next day we said, let's go to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And this was in summer of '07. But we went in 10:30, right after it opened, and we walked around until about 4:30. He and I didn't say more than about 3 sentences to each other. We just kind of drifted around.
Was it pretty cool?
It was phenomenal. It was really cool. And they had, there's a lot of real interactive movies or interactive listening of music. And again, today we can get this on our phone, but in '07, this stuff hadn't been developed yet. But we would have headphones and listening to lots of music.
As you walk through, they would play different music.
All different areas, awesome. Depending on the exhibits.
Now, we're going to move from the Beatles to,
maybe here we'll try Led Zeppelin 1.
I think that's fantastic. Now, we were just talking about, unbelievable bands.
Not to pay homage.
That was probably my album in the collection, because I love Led Zeppelin. I think, to me, the greatest four, and I'll call them musicians because Robert Plant's voice is so amazing and his range is like its own instrument. I think Led Zeppelin is the four greatest individuals to ever play rock and roll.
I'd have a hard time disagreeing. I would suggest it's hard to pick a side.
Yeah, I mean, it's like every song is fantastic.
But I would opt for side 2, just because the opening track is one of my favorite Led Zeppelin songs.
Now I'm realizing I need glasses so they can't read it from here. All right, I'm going to trust your eyes more than mine. Now,
but so when we went to, I was just going to tell you the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So when we went in there, one of the things, they had lots of different exhibits. They had pictures that Jimi Hendrix had drawn in like 3rd grade in his school, like pictures of him throwing footballs and just things like that his father had donated, personal things. So it was pretty cool to see. And there was it was a letter that Madonna had written to a friend her freshman year in college. And I forget if she went to the University of Michigan, one of the Michigan schools, because she's from Detroit. But she was writing a note to her friends saying, I don't know about this college thing. My dad wants me to go, but I really don't. I really just want to go to New York and start dancing, because that's really what I want to do. And there were a lot of other things she wrote in there, but when you're kind of seeing, wow, you're looking into the mind and heart of somebody at 18.
At that age.
It was pretty cool to see.
It's interesting,
and
you often wonder, self-reflect a little bit, if someone had to look into your life and see kind of the roads, or main road, but the different offshoots that you've taken and why you made those decisions. How interesting it would be. And I think that in family too, I think that's interesting. Some families are very close like that. Some are kind of separated, but I always think it would be interesting to have a family museum, of that kind, the history, if you can. a lot of people don't have, you know, the information or the background to do that because of a lot of separations. But like music, you know, moments, if they could be kept and remembered, I'm sure would be appreciated through different generations.
So do you have with your, like, how many nieces and nephews do you have?
You know, I have, let's see, 3 nieces and 2 nephews.
And what ages are they now?
Well, my sister's daughter is old. She's 38 now. 38. And then the rest of the kids,
So you're your granduncle now? Or great uncle?
no, just not a granduncle yet. Godfather, certainly,
okay.
5 children, which fortunately they've never had to call that card in. But just an uncle to, so my sister's daughter is the oldest, but then my 2 brothers, one brother had 2 boys, the other brother had 2 girls, and they're all like a year apart, so they're all from 22 to 18.
When you think of how we have, I have photo albums still.
Yeah.
I still have little photo albums, but the amount of photos that I have on my iPhone are astounding.
Yeah, but you know, that's the other thing with your phone. Everyone has thousands of pictures, right, on their phone, or electronically, or in the cloud, or
they're floating somewhere.
But who actually gets those? You know,
Right.
I don't really understand the concept because I grew up in a big photo album family.
Same.
In fact, one year, I think when we were in college, maybe, Charlie, Gino, Jimmy, whatever, we were still, you know, very close. But I created an album for each of them because I had so many pictures. So
It's priceless.
yeah,
that would be if you had a fire in your house. That would be one of the first things you'd want to make sure you held on to.
but now, you know, everyone's like, oh, I just have it on my phone. Well, to look at it, you got to pass your phone around.
Right.
And then what, you see one picture, you got to scroll. I don't know. I think there's something special about a photo album, too.
I agree.
A collection. You know, just like albums are to music compared to having a streaming system. You know, I think there's something special about holding the actual music physically than holding something in a cloud. And I know the younger generation would disagree and they'd be like, oh, we have all this information. But you really actually have nothing at the end of the day. If you don't have a device to
That's right.
you know, retrieve it.
I agree. It's like still. I was with someone the other day, and they were showing me an album, like one of those little books of taking pictures. Like my cousin was showing me something about books of her kids for her mom, and a book that she had made. And it's very, now I'm like, I have all these photos, but I can still go back, and I've only had my iPhone for 4 years, but I have 4 years worth of photos on there.
A lot of pictures.
It's astounding.
Yeah.
So we take it. And
There's a lot of memories.
A lot of memories, tons. But then thinking of the memories when I look at something from high school or grammar school or before that, look at pictures of my parents' wedding and things like that. Those are the priceless. You may not have 100, but you'll have 10 or 8.
Special. Really
very special.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know.
I guess when I ask about your nieces and nephews, think of how the next generations are going to document that history like we did.
Well, you know, I watched, you know, the younger generation. They kind of see them. Everyone has their phone, and they have like their wallet connected to their phone. They have their credit cards and their money and their wallet. It's just all on the phone, and this is it. I have all my memories and everything right here. What if you lose them? Then you got nothing.
That's right.
I mean, I know you can retrieve stuff from the cloud. I get that, but you know, physically you have nothing. And you know, it's hard to grasp a little bit the idea, and I'm sure that, you know, beyond our time here, we'll see, you know, things go into Bitcoin and finances will change, and there will be less and less stuff that you'll have to hold on to. And, you know, I don't know what that means. Does that mean you're going to use more of your brain to comprehend all the memories and be able to store stuff in there? Maybe it does. But for me, I'm kind of an old school guy. I like having,
It's good. It's good to
Physical
touch and
thing.
feel it.
I don't want to, lick a piece of paper and be like, oh, that's a steak, that's a ribeye. I'd rather have a ribeye. I'm not into astronaut food. A
Touch
nice
it and
bottle of
feel it.
wine, I want to open it up. I want that history to come out of the bottle. I don't want
Very
to,
tactile guy.
yeah. Or hoarder, I think they call that.
But it's true, when you look at it, I come to grips with it. Again, when I have nothing to do and I think about it as a father, I think about it with my children about thinking, okay, how do we properly or correctly, if there is a correct way, parent or give them the guidance, which is all we can really do, but from them to see, well, it's all on my phone, Dad, or it's all about the Instagram, or all about who's going to like me or not like me on my Instagram, and that's the priority, whereas, and if that is your entire, if those are all your photo albums, it kind of becomes meaningless.
If you can sleep in a bed, like a tanning bed where it just keeps you warm and you just lay there, or do you want that blanket that you're familiar with, that, your special blanket or your sweatshirt that you like to sleep in? Those things to me are a little more meaningful.
Agreed.
And I think those create more of a memory that is longer lasting than just the concept. I mean, I think this music, when you hear it, when you listen to Jimmy Page, and you referenced him earlier about how difficult it is to play it. When you actually are thinking about it, and you put the album on and put the needle down and concentrate, focus on it, that appreciation grows and the memory becomes stronger.
Mm-hmm. So when did you get this album?
This was I probably got this I did get this album in high school, but this is a re-gift of the album I had in high school, so I lost it somewhere along the way. But I think my first albums were definitely Led Zeppelin, maybe Run DMC at the time.
Mm-hmm.
It was a variety of music. My first few purchases from Rolling Stone.
That's where I bought everything. I think my first album that I actually got was KTEL Power Play Greatest Hits of 1974. I was in kindergarten. I remember they had Jim Croce, Leroy Brown. I used to love listening to Delta Dawn, so the Delta Dawn song was on there and a few others. But my parents had an original Sgt. Pepper, which I still have. It's torn to shreds because we listened to it.
Yeah,
and we had that. But
and that shows, the wear and tear also shows the appreciation.
It does.
It's I'm sure you collected baseball cards as I did when growing up. And,
Always.
You put a couple in your spokes of your bike, and
That's right.
You throw them around. Your favorite ones. Now they're worth hundreds of thousands.
Not a lot of ours. They got used.
Yeah. Do you have any collections?
I saved them all. I'm a bit of a pack rat, which
I'm the same way.
My parents kept all this stuff, and I moved around a lot in my adult years. But 20 years ago, I was living in San Francisco, and my parents were moving from the place where they lived into an apartment. And my dad said, "Okay, I'm not going to charge you for the last 25 years of storage. But I am going to charge you to have it shipped out. So I'm just letting you know, I do the packing for free, and you send me the bill."
How much was shipped out?
Oh, as a kid, I collected tons of baseball cards.
Yeah.
So I had loads of baseball cards. I used to get Baseball Digest magazines.
Which are heavy. All that stuff's heavy
It is
to
heavy.
ship out.
But what was really heavy, I also collected comic books as a kid.
Oh.
So I had all of those, and they were pretty big.
Now, do you still have all?
I have them all.
That's
and
great.
They're worth a lot because we kept them, but it's still, I was hoping maybe my kids would like them. I tried to get my son into baseball cards, but they're into video games, and they're not into the same kind of things we were.
It's so strange because, I'm the same way. I had my collections, and I just don't, I'm sure I could sell them, but I just don't really want to.
It's like that history. I mean, sometimes every once in a while I'll look through these things. Like my father collected coins and stamps as a kid. So when we were little kids, sometimes on a Sunday he'd take out his coin collection. We'd look through all these things he'd collect with his mother or his aunts and
The
showing
Walking
his-
Liberties and
all of that.
oh,
Yes,
yeah, those are
everything.
great. I have a few of those.
Yes, and it's even now like maybe they're worth a little more. They're not really worth much for collecting. It's
Yeah.
just the silver value.
Yeah.
But I look at that and think, well, I collected that with my dad.
Yeah.
And I had that as a kid.
Yeah.
And it's hard to give that up.
My father gave me, he had a baseball signed by the entire Chicago Cubs team in 1963.
Oh,
So he had it forever, and then he passed it on to me. And I kept it. And he'd be like, "You sell that ball?" I go, "Of course I got it." He goes, "Why don't you sell it?" I go, "Nah, I'm gonna sell it for a couple dollars.
sure.
Because I'm gonna blow on something that I won't remember, or do I save the memory?
Yes.
So-
So you could give to maybe one of your nephews or something.
Yeah, maybe. I mean,
Someday.
probably, unfortunately, when I'm not around anymore, all this crap will probably just be tossed away. They'll probably just throw it in the garbage. They'll be like, "Why do you save all this stuff for?"
So what else do you have? What other collections? or things
Well,
that you
baseball
kept?
cards certainly.
Did you keep all your cards?
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I'm pretty diligent about organization. Because I kept the cards with me physically. I would never leave them with my mother because I heard the horrible stories about how my mother threw out my brother's baseball cards. They'll never let her, live it down. Oh, we had this, we had that.
Well, your brother's old enough where his cards actually did have some serious
Yeah,
value.
well, they had all the Mantle, all the
Yeah, sure.
Yankees and stuff. So I kept the cards with me and traveled with me if I ever, in college. So I brought them to school with me.
Oh, you did? Oh, you
in
really
different
kept them
apartments,
with you.
yeah. And then I really, downtown, living downtown
Mhm.
for 15, 20 years. And then one time when I moved out of state, for a couple of years, I brought them up. But I never left them.
Made sure they were protected.
I mean, it's not a huge collection. It's big enough where it's a couple crates of
But if you didn't have that, you could still look back and think about where you bought those, when
Oh,
you
yeah.
bought those.
I have some toys that have never been opened. G.I. Joe, Star Wars, those goofy things,
Mhm.
They're in a box somewhere in the vault.
That was the good thing about having a son. My son's 9 years old. Eventually, when he was about 4, he started watching Star Wars. So I thought, okay, it's time to take those old Star Wars figures and
Yeah.
pass them on. All the originals from
Do the
77.
kids still do Dungeons and Dragons?
They do.
I'm sure it's all online though, right?
It is. Well, I believe it or not, I own a small little rental apartment that I rent out. And these guys are about 25, 26, and when I go over there to fix things, these guys have Dungeons and Dragons.
Are you on the show Big Bang Theory? Is that you I saw come in? That's what it sounds like.
These guys, well, I'm like, oh, you guys are playing role-playing games here.
All right, I'll come back later and change the light bulb. Whatever you guys are into.
Don't cast a spell.
No, I remember going. I mean, Neil had
Neil?
famous Dungeons and
Yes,
Dragons.
we were the nerdy kids playing Dungeons and
I
Dragons.
did that. I think only once or twice with you guys and Neil, but I lived across the street from Desmond Wong.
Oh,
So Desmond and his older brother Ken and I would play.
okay.
So not quite. We didn't have the outfits right.
We didn't have the outfits either.
No, I know. But people get really into it. And then
They do.
the re-release of Tolkien's Lord of the Rings,
That's
or
right.
the revive all that. Yeah, a lot of history.
Reveals all our past.
Scary. Yeah, very cool guys listening to vinyl and drinking white wine together.
Hiding no secrets.
Yeah, exactly. Well, going back to music a little bit, I think Led Zeppelin would have been. There's two bands that I would have loved to see that I never had a chance to. Although the second one I've had 3 chances, and unfortunate things have happened along the way where I had to miss those 3 shows. But Led Zeppelin definitely would have been a band that I would have loved to see live. You never?
I never did. No, I think it was. I was first introduced to Led Zeppelin. I think it was literally weeks before John Bonham died. My friend George got Led Zeppelin 4 from his cousin, and we put it on his mother's really very 1970-esque
Nice.
record player that was in their living room, and we just listened to the first couple of songs, and we were like, "What is this?" And it just mesmerized us.
Yeah.
and then John Bonham was dead like 2 weeks later. I actually, one of my regrets, I think that it's, I think as we get older, I think we just have to, I keep saying this, even I said to a friend the other day, we gotta live experiences.
Yeah.
And we're talking about collections, so yes, I've collected all that stuff. I have lots of stuff. I like my baseball cards,
Yeah.
I like my records, don't misunderstand me, but just stuff. But I think more and more about the experiences as we get older. And someone recently told me, we're 51, but we're not like approaching middle age anymore. Now we're kind of young, old people.
Yeah.
And we are, not being mortal about it, but the reality is, how many more decades or years do we have? And it's about the experiences. And Led Zeppelin played, I think it was late 07. They played at the O2 in London. I was living here in Chicago, but I remember when they announced, I think, 2 or 3 shows, I was like, oh my God, Led Zeppelin's reuniting for this very, very limited time. And I wish I just kind of went into my deep savings and said, let's go.
Whatever it takes.
Yeah, whatever it takes, because it'll never happen again.
Well, to your point, I think, when you're younger, you pass on experiences because you're looking forward to the future and, putting finances away and spending it differently. But then you get to a certain point, like you said, and once you get over that point, that hump, then you're like, let's start using some of this savings or this future for the present. Right?
True.
So you're not putting away the future, or you're not putting away the present for the future. You're trading in, your future for the present.
I talked to a friend of mine last night. I hadn't talked to him in years, and we talked for a couple hours. He's a friend from Chicago who lives in California, and we something he told me years ago, 15 years ago. He used to work at Gatorade, and he worked at Coke for 7 or 8 years, Gatorade 7 or 8 years, and then he got a job with IBM and had a couple of really good years. And
a little bit.
Sure, great guy, great salesman.
Sure.
But what Tim did is, I remember him for 2 or 3 years, he didn't work. And I remember him back then telling me, when I ran into him, I said, how are things going? He said, Chris, I've been enjoying some travel. I'm driving around the States. And he was in his mid to late 30s at the time. And he said, I went to New Zealand. I'm doing things now. I'm basically borrowing a couple of years of my retirement and using it now. I'm trying to do things now that I might not be able to do at 75. And it was a pretty simple statement, but, and I told him last night when we were talking for the first time in a long time, I said, I loved when you said that, because it really means something that, we're gonna get older, and, we're young enough where I don't feel old. I feel, you don't look old, I don't look old. We're older, but still physically able to do anything. But 20 years from now, what the future has.
Let's think about, when you're just living life, you're not actually exerting too much energy relative to what you do, I assume. But when you go on vacation sometimes, depending on what you want to do, you have to exert some energy. I mean, I remember my father, and he was older than I am now, went to Machu Picchu. And that's you have to exert physically to get up there. It's difficult, So to enjoy some of the things in life, if you so choose, you do have to have some sort of physical ability.
Most people aren't going to be able to do that at 75.
No.
Whether you can afford it or not, physically.
Listen, a couple of years, I'm not a little concerned. I want to stay on the first floor. I had trouble going to Trader Joe's and coming back with that. But yeah, it's, you're pulling around a cart at this age, then where are you going to be in 10 years?
There's things that will pass you by. So don't let time, don't look at tomorrow too many times. Don't mark your days like you're.
I don't see New Zealand as a flat area to go wander around. I went to Paris by myself for a week in 2000, right? So 20 years ago. I walked every single day. I had never been overseas. I had never traveled outside of the United States. So when I went to Paris, I think I was probably wearing, it was during December, so it was colder time of the year, but, wearing, what are the boots that, not Timberland, but the, I forgot whatever the brand was
Okay.
at that time, trendy, and not the right shoes
Doc
to
Martens?
walk around.
Doc
It's something,
Martens?
yeah, probably something of that nature. But those aren't the shoes that you want to walk around a 500-year-old town in cobblestone, for 8 hours a day. I had blisters like that big on the bottom of my foot. But yeah, you have to really physically just to do average things. You have to, because the rest of the world isn't like here. It's not like you just get well, maybe you do now. Maybe you just get an Uber, but it's
Most
not.
people are.
Yeah, it's not
Most
flat.
people are a little, right. And the
Paved.
shape of a lot of Americans are not necessarily as healthy as other people. Not entirely, but you're
No,
right.
you ran a marathon. I saw that.
I did.
Yeah.
I do triathlons, so I got
Regular.
I do. I just started 4 years ago. I just
Working towards the Ironman, or
I've done 2 Ironman
Come on.
races. So yeah, the last
That's
couple
wow.
years. So
Great.
I did my
Congratulations.
first race in 2016, and then in 2017 I did a half Ironman, and then I thought, let's go all the way. So
where was the full one?
in Madison. So I
They
did.
did a full Ironman.
They have
in
a
Madison?
phenomenal. It's one of the greatest.
My brother
races.
lived there for a while.
It's a great town.
Yeah.
Great town.
Yeah.
Great town.
We hung out around the Capitol. A lot of great restaurants.
Very
there.
cool. Good, great. I mean, the downtown area is fantastic.
Yeah, I
Real
thought it
good
was-
restaurants.
We stayed at a beautiful old hotel, I think, down by the water. If you were looking at the Capitol, down by the water,
Was
there's
it
a
the
old hotel.
Edgewater? Edgewater.
That
Hotel?
sounds right. Yeah.
Okay, beautiful. That's
Yeah,
where
that
I
was-
stayed.
Yeah, it was
First
real
time
nice.
I was there.
Real
Real
nice.
nice.
Well, let's
Okay.
move on.
All right. So last one is. Oh, sorry. Here you go. Kevin.
Yeah, no worries.
No, Velvet Underground.
Velvet Underground. And I'll tell you, I haven't heard this album, even though it's in my collection. And I am not, I probably know some songs. I couldn't name one. And you told me Lou Reed was the lead singer of Velvet Underground,
Yes,
right?
and I'm not familiar, but I like the music.
Yeah,
and
let's just, we'll just go with it.
I'd say I don't have a preference.
Now, this is classic New York underground
Mhm.
music, right?
Yes.
Were you ever at CBGB's when it was open?
I
You were
was
there?
not at CBGB's.
I had never been there either.
I lived in Hoboken, New Jersey in 94 to 96, so I'd go down around there, but
You know the famous person from Hoboken, right?
Frank Sinatra.
Of course. Do they have a statue of him?
Abner Doubleday.
Yeah. Yeah.
I guess Hamilton was shot there.
Whoa.
Aaron Burr. I learned when I saw the Hamilton movie.
Well, you didn't know that lived.
I didn't remember my history.
Just across the river from New York City.
Just across the river. So we used to go and hang out in a lot down in the village and kind of in the
Yeah.
Lower East Side here and there, but I never went to CBGB's. That was one of my regrets.
Yeah.
Hence, take advantage of things now.
That's it.
You never know.
Say yes to every opportunity.
Had you been to CBGB's?
No. I know Gino has. I'm not a New York guy. I'll tell you. I was there a couple times when I went to school out east. But I never became a New York guy. Like, it never was like, I gotta go to New York. And then, a period of my life, I don't know how long ago, 15 years ago? Could it be that long? Maybe less. 12. My girlfriend at the time got me baseball tickets to see the very last time the White Sox played the Yankees in old Yankee Stadium.
Oh, very cool.
And she knew I was a Yankees fan, even though I grew up here as a Cubs fan. And I'd never been to Yankee Stadium, so it was a fantastic trip. We just went down for a few days. Caught up with some old college friends who are all from down there, and it was great. But I'm still a Chicago guy over New York. Although I must say, I had, that pizza debate drives me crazy when people are like thick crust, thin crust, Chicago,
Yeah, sure.
New York. I'm probably a New York pizza guy because we went to Lombardi's in Little Italy. That pizza was spectacular.
It's great.
It just doesn't compare to anything. And it's not the tavern style that we do here. I'm not a thick crust guy, so.
My father's from Brooklyn, New York.
Oh.
My mom's from the north side of Chicago. So, and they met many, many years ago, lived in Brooklyn. I was born in Brooklyn, so we spent my whole life going back to New York at some point, seeing my grandfather. My grandmother passed when I was young, but my dad grew up in a 2-flat where he and his 2 brothers and his mom and dad lived in a 2-bedroom apartment on the lower level, and upstairs, like it's row houses. And he had 3 spinster aunts, a couple uncles, some cousins. So they had, I think, 7 or 8 or 9 people that lived up in this kind of 2.5 bedroom place. It was almost like, must have been like Willy Wonka. Like 2 or 3 people sleeping in the same.
It's amazing that people live that way.
It really is, but I guess when I look back on it, that's what it was.
Yeah.
And Depression era mentality. But we would go back and see my grandfather and my great aunts, who all treated us so wonderfully. And the first thing we always did, we'd drive into New York as kids, and my dad would go down the street, get a nice New York pizza. And you couldn't get that back in those days. You couldn't get it outside. Certainly couldn't get it in the Midwest.
Yeah.
To that taste. But I'm like you. I love my Lou Malnati's deep dish. I love Vito and Nick's on the south side.
Oh yeah.
But I love New York pizza. There's nothing like it.
Yeah, outside of Lombardi's, the second best place I've had pizza, surprisingly, and maybe it was just a long trip that I had, but I had this pizza at a place called Fat Dave's in Galway, in Ireland.
In Galway, okay.
That was that.
You wouldn't think pizza in Ireland?
Yeah. We stumbled upon this place out there, and all of a sudden I'm like, let's get another one. It was so good. Now, listen, I had been drinking Guinness for a couple days.
This is real good.
Yeah, I don't know. No, it was early in our trip, because that was only the first couple days there. So I still remember that pizza like it was yesterday. It was that good.
So where'd you go in Ireland? When was that trip?
Around the same time as the New York trip. So that same year. And then we flew into Dublin. You get in early in the morning. We got right on the train and took the train right to Galway. 3 hours. Stayed in Galway for like 3 days. Went to the Cliffs of Moher. Hung out in Galway. And then we came back to Dublin and spent another 5 days there. My girlfriend, who, she was a petite girl, wasn't a huge drinker, but I said, we're gonna experience Dublin through this guidebook I have. The guidebook was all the oldest pubs in Dublin. I said, but the thing is, we're gonna have to have a Guinness at every place on this list.
Were there 19 pubs or 25?
It was like 25. So we toured the city based on the map of the pubs, which was a cool way to see things because we saw all the other sites as well. But I lived it. We had a Guinness at every single pub that was along the tour.
There's nothing like a Guinness in Ireland.
And we stayed at the Grisham, which would be equivalent to the Drake Hotel here, on where the post office is in Dublin, the historic battle they had in the post office. So O'Connell Street, maybe?
Oh yes.
And it was also the weekend of the Irish games. So it was Cork against Kerry, which was incredible because that's their national Super Bowl. So Cork and Kerry, the 2 colors of the teams, red and blue. We came down on the day of the match, and it was a sea of just red and blue in the lobby, in the bar, like the whole makeup of the street. Cool. It was amazing.
That's great.
And we learned Irish football through the various pubs that we stopped at that day. But we saw the Book of Kells at the Trinity College. It was a great trip. It was just to wander around that city. And again, you see a different culture, you see a different way of life, and a life that's been around much longer than the United States. And, there's a different appreciation you have for what you come back home to.
It's true, very true. Did you, what do you prefer, being in Dublin as a city or being in the country, or?
Well,
it's always a bigger city.
Again, it's like saying Chicago or we travel outside. I never have a preference. I mean, Chicago is my preference of life. But when I travel, I don't have a preference. You know, I always try to keep an open mind. I really appreciate the aspect of the moment. With you living at different areas, did you ever think that the different places in the world that you've lived at was better than kind of Chicago or where you come from?
I'm a pretty half full, glass is half full guy.
Yeah.
I love everywhere I go.
Yeah.
I went into everywhere thinking, okay, what can I learn?
Yeah.
And I was, when I left Chicago, I lived in Hoboken, New Jersey, and I lived in Tokyo. And I was like, this is just such a new experience. And for me, like, I enjoyed being, let's say, the social minority, in that I was learning something about an entirely different culture, where it's very different, where it's different than going to Europe, where we all look alike. I was definitely an oddball.
Yeah.
And they knew what I looked like. I mean, I was definitely a foreigner. There's no confusing issues there. But then being able to learn about the culture and see things, and everyone was very welcoming and friendly, and I felt very warm there. And then being in London, that was more of a melting pot, where it's just such a cosmopolitan place, where literally you could walk down the street and hear 6 different languages.
Yeah.
From anywhere, Middle East, Asia, somewhere else in Europe. And I felt that it was very, really educational, but just cool. Like, I love learning about different cultures. And
Yeah, I would hope everyone would feel that way. You know, that's the idea, is you should learn more than what you know, and absorb any knowledge that you can get from anything you experience.
I think in going to, what was really cool when I was 25, when I got this opportunity to work in Japan, and or at least get involved in the Japanese economy and then move there. It was so different. I looked at it as us being from primarily European American history and going over to somewhere like in Asia where it was just all different. And like, I didn't know much of anything, and I loved it, and it was great to sponge it in.
Did you listen to any music when you were their local music or their cultural music?
I did. It was kind of, I couldn't understand anything, but I flicked the TV on because I'm not saying that I had a long level of patience. I didn't watch for hours, but I'd hear generally pop, kind of like K-pop, it's J-pop, and then they had like Japanese pop music, and it wasn't really my thing. But we had a place, it's one of the greatest bars I've been to, and anybody that's been to Tokyo over the last 30 years, probably people our age would concur. There's a place called Bauhaus in Tokyo, so anybody that goes to Tokyo, it still exists.
It would be their CBGB, maybe?
Well, it's a thing where there were these Japanese guys that were dressed very much like Velvet Underground, very much like David Bowie, kind of Ziggy Stardust, makeup and all.
Sure.
And this guy would sit there and they'd jam 60s and 70s rock for 45 minutes. You'd pay by the hour, and it's kind of hard to understand now, but you go into this small little Japanese place, not much bigger than your entire living room here. And these guys would be playing different sets of Zeppelin.
Can you request that?
You could write it down. If I remember correctly, you could, but we'd go and you just have some beers, and I'd be with a buddy of mine saying, and he'd be like, he's a guy who lived in Tokyo for a lot longer than me. He's like, you want to stay again? And it was expensive, because it was very expensive back in those days.
Well, you're seeing an individual show. Basically.
You are, and it's small, quaint, and you're seeing these guys,
that's pretty awesome.
Japanese guys singing English-speaking songs, and they were. I know a lot of foreigners would go, and they're like, they got to go to Bauhaus and spend a couple hours. It was pretty cool.
I had a chance to see, and again, this is probably 12, 15 years ago, a tour that came through Chicago of Korean women punk bands.
That's pretty cool.
It came through. There was like 4 bands that played. And I remember there was one band called Bleach, and I'm like, yeah, they're awesome. All female punk bands.
Very cool.
Really fun.
Very cool.
You know, and the great thing about music is there's so many different genres and styles and personality that goes into all the makeup of everything.
There is.
You know, and it cross appeals to many people, but there is something for everybody.
There is. And so much of what we listen, so much of what I listen to, I guess, is British old British rock and
Yeah.
roll, American rock and roll, 60s, 70s, things that we listened to as kids.
It's hard, because that's the foundation, but it's
Mhm.
fun to have that as a foundation because it's so structured and it's still popular.
Yes.
And then to branch off. Are you a country music guy at all?
No, I don't dislike country.
No.
I mean, I was not, when we were young, like in the 70s, that country was
Yeah.
not mine. I didn't like watching
Well, it's
bebop.
country pop now, right?
Right,
Taylor
it is.
Swift.
And generally it's good. I mean, I don't dislike it.
Yeah.
I listen to it sometimes.
It's well produced.
It is. I think it's
Are you
well,
a Johnny Cash fan at all?
love Johnny Cash. We just watched the Johnny Cash movie again
Yeah.
a couple weeks ago.
Did you see Chess Records? You saw that movie with
I did.
Adrian Brody?
No,
Beyonce?
I think, no. I've
The
heard
only
it.
reason,
I
well,
haven't seen it yet.
there's many reasons to watch it, but because you saw Chuck Berry as your
Mhm.
first show, he plays a part in the
Oh,
movie,
okay.
and it's based in Chicago,
Yes.
so it's so fantastic.
Okay. I mean, sometimes on Netflix, I've seen a couple of great. I mean, they have great documentaries.
Yeah, and it's an old movie too. Chess Records, I think,
Mm-hmm.
is 8 years or so at least.
You've seen Muscle Shoals on
No.
Netflix? That's a good one.
Yeah.
I have a couple buddies that sometimes will say, "Hey, I checked this out this weekend," and that's good. That's Muscle Shoals, Alabama,
Yeah,
and the people that went there to record. I've seen some about Motown as well.
yeah.
where
Memphis has some. And
It's pretty amazing when
Um,
you see these things.
there's so many great areas in the country with music
There are.
regionally.
Did you ever see Dave Grohl had that show on HBO?
I didn't
Sonic
see
Highway?
it. I didn't see it.
Great.
Yeah, that
Great
looked awesome.
series. I don't have HBO, so I saw the first 3 or 4.
I get like 5 channels on this.
Yeah, that's right. You're not a TV guy. If you get a chance, check it out. It's pretty cool.
I'll download it or stream it or whatever the kids are doing these days.
It starts in Chicago, and it talks about him being here as a young.
Yeah, and he wrote that one song. Doesn't he write a song for every town?
He does. He writes a song
Yeah,
for
I
everything.
saw clips of that. That is pretty interesting.
Very cool.
And I think songwriting too is pretty amazing. It seems easy enough, right, when you watch him do it.
Mm-hmm.
But if you had to put your own thoughts together to music and to make a melody, I think
It's brilliant.
It's just
Yeah,
unbelievable.
it really is. You
Yeah.
put out an album. I mean, anyone that writes a song, I wouldn't even know where to begin.
I had trouble putting the needle on it. Well, with that said, I just want to thank you for coming,
Kevin, thanks.
and it was great.
Been a
Spending
pleasure.
a couple
Really
hours
good.
listening to music and
Loved it.
Reminiscing is unbelievable.
Excellent. Thank you. Thanks for inviting me. Appreciate it.
Anytime, and hopefully you'll be on our continuing series as we
Oh,
move
I love
forward.
it.